Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Formula Fun podcast with me, Jay.
And me, Sinead.
How are we doing, Sinead? All good?
Yep, really good today, Jay. Thanks very much.
Good.
How about you?
I'm good. We're very good, thank you. We're doing a special episode today because last week, as Sinead rightly pointed out in our last episode, Drive to Survive Season 8, I think, was released on Netflix. And I haven't watched it, but Sinead has. And
Woo!
Sinead is here to give us all of her thoughts, opinions, questions, whatever else comes out of it in regards to what you thought. So,
Yeah.
how was Season 8?
Well, I guess I should start by saying that Drive to Survive is the way that I got into Formula One. And I've been seeing a lot of discourse online, people saying, oh, you know, there's a lot of people out there that seem to be turning their back on it, even though it's the thing that also got them into Formula One. Like now that they're, maybe one or two seasons proper fans, they're like, oh, Drive to Survive is so bad. Like, I don't know why anybody watches it. So I'm here to sort of fight its corner a little bit because I've seen a lot of negativity online. And I think it still holds merit somewhat in the Formula One universe.
There's also people that don't watch the Formula One season because they don't want Drive to Survive. They don't want to be spoiled by what the results are.
Yeah. So they watch Drive to Survive first and then they rewatch the season from the year before.
If it's interesting, I guess.
To fill in the gaps. Yeah, I could see that. Well, that was the thing. I was like, oh no, like maybe we shouldn't do it in case there's people that haven't watched Drive to Survive and they don't want any spoilers. And then I was like, wait. It's actually kind of fascinating that it works that way, because you would think like no one would watch it because it's essentially already happened. But here we are.
Yeah, like at the moment, I feel like everyone that watches Formula One is gearing up for these new regulations and these new these new cars that are going to hit the track literally this week, and instead we're watching back on what happened last year. But yeah, like you say, it works and it gets a new fan base into the sport. So,
and it's also a quick way to like refresh your memory, because there was loads of stuff that I'd sort of half forgotten about, because I find so much went on last year that it's kind of hard to remember it all. So yeah, I really liked it. Obviously, I'll go through I'm not going to take you through like an episode by episode breakdown or anything like that, but I'll go through what I liked. Interestingly, there were a few very big stories from last year that didn't make the cut. And so maybe we can talk a little bit about why we think that is. Like, I have some thoughts, and I'm sure you will too once I tell you what they are. We had our beloved Will Buxton back in the chair. And I don't know if he's been reading all the stuff that all the memeing that's been going on about him, but there was definitely a lot less him saying really obvious things. So that was good. And Claire Williams was there too, and I really like her. I think she gives really kind of on point insight into everything that's happening.
So people that haven't, that maybe still haven't watched Drive to Survive and have only just got into, maybe have been listening to this podcast and they're a bit interested and a bit curious as to what Formula One is. The two people Sinead is talking about there is Will Buxton used to work for Formula One TV. He was one of the main presenters, and then he was brought in to do a lot of the Drive to Survive interviews. And lots of memes about him where he would basically say, and the person that would win the race is the driver who would drive the fastest. Very obvious things, but it was good for TV and it was good for Drive to Survive. And then Claire Williams, I think, was the other person you mentioned there. She is the daughter of Frank Williams, who is sadly is no longer with us. Not Claire, Frank, her father. But her father, Frank, set up the Williams F1 racing team, and Claire took over that team, but then was bought out a few years ago now. But yeah, she's still kicking around Drive to Survive. I know she was in last season, so it's good that they've got her back again for this season.
Yeah. So yeah, as ever, they didn't go linear, or they didn't go a linear approach. So they didn't go, here's how the season started, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this is how it ended. It was kind of back and forward, back and forward. I like that because it's better for their, like, you know, narrative storytelling. Again, people are like, I found it really confusing because one minute we were in Bahrain, and then the next minute we were in Las Vegas, and then the next minute this, that, and the other. But I really enjoyed it. So we started off with we met the rookies. They kind of had their own episode, which was nice. I guess because there were so many of them. There were 6 rookies /7 that started last year. And it was kind of interesting to see just how brutal Jack Doohan was treated at the start of the season. So Jack Doohan started as a rookie for Alpine, and Alpine had also just been had appointed a new team principal in Flavio Briatore. And frankly, in my opinion, the less said about him, the better. But we'll move on.
Yeah, Flavio Briatore, I'll really quickly touch on it. Flavio Briatore is responsible for bringing Michael Schumacher into Benetton. He's responsible for bringing Alonso into Renault when he was the team principal at Renault back in the day in like the early 2000s. There was a crash gate happened in 2008 where Flavio Briatore and I believe Pat Simmons was the other one, were basically banned from the sport because they basically told their second driver to crash in order for the teammate to win from a strategic point of view. To crash on the circuit, which is obviously not very good for safety, for drivers, for marshals, for fans, and that's not the way that F1 should be run. But Flavio came back at 74 years old, I believe. He's back in the paddock, and he's back as he wasn't an advisor for Alpine, but now he is acting team principal whilst they find somebody else, because Oliver Oakes, who was team principal, stepped down. Don't know if that's because of Flavio, but he's a particular kind of taste in terms of a character.
Yeah, he achieved a lot within the sport, and then he also did a lot of stuff outside of the sport. But this is a non-political podcast, so we're not going to go into it. What was actually quite cool, which so they did because it was the 75th anniversary. I didn't realize this. Because it was the 75th anniversary of Formula One last year, they revealed all of the cars at the same event, which is different from usually they each get their own reveal in whatever country they want to do it in their own way. But they did this huge big event in London where all the cars and drivers and team principals and everybody was in the same place at the same time.
Hosted
which must have been very exciting. Yeah, love him. He's great. Dream gig for him, I imagine. And I also didn't know this, but when Horner came out onto the stage, he was booed like a pantomime villain.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And like, okay, so you and I don't know, you and I both know that in a theatre, if there are boos and it's being recorded, quite often the boos aren't picked up in the recording, you know, unless they're really, really loud. This was pretty damning. So that sort of took me aback a little bit. I mean, he took it in stride, as he does, because he's a very hard-nosed guy. But I was like, ooh, okay. And interesting to learn for me that going into Formula One, Bortoleto, who drives for Sauber, was coming in as an F4, F3 and F2 champion. So on paper, the quote-unquote most qualified rookie. And I think they were all talking about how promising he is, and I think he is. But I also think it's kind of a shame that he's in Sauber, where he's maybe not able to show his full potential, unlike, say, somebody like Kimi Antonelli, who started at Mercedes, which is like one of the best teams on the grid.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So, like, for example, Charles Leclerc, from who's now at Ferrari, started at Sauber, but was always a Ferrari junior driver.
Academy driver, yeah.
There was always the intention at some point he would like make that step up. But I think Bortoleto is... I want to say a McLaren. No, I don't know. I could be wrong.
He is an academy driver for one of the bigger teams, but I think I also can't remember which one it is. But I think, there was essentially nowhere else for him to go. So better for him to go to Sauber than not drive on Formula One at all.
Sauber at that point was a exciting project because of the fact they've now gone to Audi. They're now a works team. He is a junior McLaren driver. Well, he was a junior McLaren driver. So that would be the logical step up at some point. But obviously these teams, like if they don't have any space for their team, they'll very often sort of loan their driver out to another team in the hope they can build up momentum and experience to then maybe make the step up into the big team one day. Who knows?
So then I got introduced to we're just gonna I'm not gonna say in an episode 2 this happened, in episode 3 this happened. So this was my first introduction to a man called Jonathan Wheatley, who is the team principal for Sauber now, and he seems like a complete legend. He's just like moseying around. He has like a northern English accent. He's just sitting in a cafe with his wife, like having a full fry up for breakfast. Like, he seems like he has his head screwed on, and his approach to nurturing his drivers is quite, wholesome, for want of a better word. And they sort of portrayed this in comparison to somebody like Flavio Briatore, who's extremely brutal. And as we, I don't think we even said it there, but he kicked Jack Doohan out after just 2 races. He gave him 2 races to prove himself. And then he said, nope, we're kicking you out and we're replacing you with another rookie. And spoiler alert, that rookie went on to score 0 points. Franco Colapinto. Now, I'm not bad-mouthing him. He's also a great driver, but it's like the other guy didn't even get a look in, and I just don't... It's just not fair,
Yeah. I think it was a few more than 2, because I had Liam Lawson had 2, and then I think Jack Doohan went up until, I want to say Miami. So I think it was like 6, but then he got booted out after the Miami Grand Prix, and then Colapinto took his place. What was funny about Colapinto taking his place is that Colapinto has more followers on social media than Alpine do, so they were very much like, and also has a lot of money to bring to the team.
There you go.
Yeah.
Interesting. So yeah, I mean, it sort of made me think about that there's kind of a spectrum of team principals and how they approach things. So on one end you have Flavio, and I guess Christian Horner as well. He can be quite, he kicked Liam Lawson out after 2 races, as we just said, so that was a lot. He did appear in the documentary, but then some stuff happened, so we'll talk about that in a bit as well. And then on the other end of the table, you have James Vowles, for example, who is kind of more softly spoken, and he's very supportive in a kind of positive way. Like, even when things go wrong, he's not throwing things across the room and blaming everybody except himself and all that sort of stuff. So it was interesting for them to draw comparisons between each one and how each approaches their team and how that affects the results. So, and then of course the best team principal, in my opinion, who is Toto Wolff, who seems to really strike that balance between being being strict because he wants to be at the top, but also knowing when it's important to be supportive as well, especially of Kimi, who is brand new, coming into the sport for the first time, and he's like 18. So
Jonathan Wheatley's a weird one, because I think Jonathan Wheatley has really reimagined himself in terms of, and he's got a new purpose. I mean, I feel like Jonathan Wheatley is now absolutely loving life at the fact that he is a team principal. He started out as a mechanic, and he literally has just worked his way up. But when he was at Red Bull, especially that year in 21, which we spoke about last week, he was almost seen as one of the villains at Red Bull. And then since he's left Red Bull and gone to Sauber, which is now Audi, he really has repurposed himself, and he's more natural and it's more likable. Because I remember it being Christian Horner, Jonathan Wheatley, Adrian Newey, they're the ones that are the villains,
Yeah.
which you need in every sport. You need a villain, and I get the whole. Well, not that I get the booing, but the booing in the London opening, I remember that because I watched it live, and I was like, oh, that's a lot.
Yeah.
But he then, because he did take it in good faith, I was like, oh, it is all a game, and it's all a big show, and it's all for entertainment. I don't like when drivers get booed on the podium, but that's another side point.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Interesting that he's really... I feel like Jonathan Wheatley, I've listened to an interview with him on the F1 podcast Beyond the Grid, and he is just so open, and I really hope that Audi do some really cool things this year.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to seeing more of him, definitely.
I have a question about Drive to Survive. When they first started, the first couple of seasons I really enjoyed, because I think you caught glimpses of like the drivers talking to one another, because there was just a microphone hanging overhead and they weren't used to it. We're now 8 seasons in. Does that still happen, or are they a bit more like, oh, they're here again, and then it's sort of like they're probably struggling to get the footage of decent conversations, because the first 2 seasons were great.
Yeah, you do get some like clandestine chats between the drivers. It's never anything too revelatory, it's just maybe Max chatting to the rookies, giving them advice, that kind of a thing. But what I did notice, that there were some so they did catch sometimes maybe some of the engineers or mechanics in the paddock talking with their backs turned, saying things like maybe criticizing a call that the principals had made, or being annoyed that their driver hadn't won because of a mistake that had been made on their end.
Right.
And I don't think they realised that would make it in. So I'd be interested to know if any of them have been pulled into head office for those comments.
Let's just get a TV and just press play and go, have you been watching this? Because you said that about us, and that's not good.
Yeah, and I think the most damning example of this actually was in the Las Vegas Grand Prix, where there was a huge breaking news story about McLaren, who ended up being disqualified from the race for an infraction on their planks being too close to the ground. Zach Brown talking to one of his colleagues, saying like something like, do you think they'll check it? Are they going to check it? And then the guy he's talking to says, Netflix is right behind you. So yeah, they are definitely... It's becoming a bit meta, because everybody is cognizant that it's always everything they say is being filmed. Yep. But like we find, I don't know, with reality TV, people that have gone on reality TV often say, gosh, after a while you just forget that that they're there, and you sort of slip into just speaking freely because you forget that you're being recorded. So that was probably the most significant slip up that I could see.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I think the first few seasons I was so hooked, because I was like, oh, this is I want to see the behind the scenes bit that we don't see on TV. Yeah. That's what I've always watched Drive to Survive for, because I feel like I'm relatively over the seat, like as in like a viewpoint. I've seen the season, I know what happened, I know the ups and downs, I know the big stories that happened, and sometimes I think Drive to Survive has sometimes dramatized it a bit too much, like hear team radio, which I'm like, I am fully aware that team radio is from a different race, but you've put it in this race to make it sound more like intense, and then you hear the drivers talking about it going, yeah, I didn't say that in that race.
I didn't say that. Yeah.
But yeah, the behind the scenes stuff was great.
Yeah.
But I felt like last year, when I saw it it felt like there was a lot more setups in terms of
staged conversations, or
we'll go on location, and these two people or this group of people will have a conversation. I'm like, it feels very staged.
Yes.
Which is maybe why I haven't rushed to watch it as quickly as I would have used to.
Absolutely, yeah, I think that's fair. I watched it with my partner, who's also into F1, and that was one of the things that he said. He said he finds it a bit cringy, when you see like two people talking, and it's clear that the producers have gone, you need to talk about this topic.
Right, okay.
In particular, I think there was one moment near the end where everybody was speculating going into Abu Dhabi who was going to win, because it was still a 3-way championship, and you just kind of had all the different people kind of sitting on their balcony or like whatever, talking to their friend about who they thought was the best, who they would put money on to win, and it just felt a bit like
this is staged. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, would you recommend it to be watched? Is it worth a watch? Should I watch it?
I think it's always worth a watch. You're always going to get so I think couple of big things that were for me like, what the hell, like why did they not put this in? So McLaren, right? They did a little bit about like Oscar versus Lando, but they seemed really intent on being like, they're really good friends, there's no rivalry here, which, you know, they are friends, but they didn't really emphasize, you know, just how dramatic it was in terms of Piastri's at the top, now Lando's at the top, now Piastri's, you know, I would have liked a linear approach to that, to say like, this is how dramatic it was in terms of, you know, Piastri's like ascent to the top until halfway through the season, and then his demise essentially, and Lando kind of taking over, and then Max coming into the fray quite late on. They could have done an episode where they just tracked that to show just how much things were moving around, and they didn't really do that. And they didn't address like the Zandvoort incident where they asked Piastri to give the position back. They didn't put that in at all.
Monza.
For God's sake.
It's okay.
What happened in Zandvoort that was...
Zandvoort,
how do you remember all this off the top of your head? Like
Lando Norris's had an oil leak in Zandvoort, and he retired.
And he didn't finish. Yeah, there. That's what it was.
I'm just a loser. That's how I remember.
Should we like no? But like it's weird because I have such a good memory for like, I don't know, remembering all the actors in a TV show or something. But I'm not there yet with my ability to recall stats out of thin air. So and that's okay, you know, we're all learning. Yes. I'll get there. But yeah, so they glossed over like
right
a lot of the McLaren.
Did they touch on Azerbaijan Baku race, which is where basically Oscar just had the biggest weekend to forget, where he crashed? Yes. He got okay, good. They got a bad start and all that stuff. Okay, that's good. Did they touch on Nico Hülkenberg's podium?
Of course, they couldn't have left that out.
Good.
That was they did put that in, and they did talk about, you know, how he'd done 200 and whatever starts with no wins, and just how sort of monumental it was, which was really good to see. Nice to relive that moment.
How about
which was good.
Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari? Much on that.
They also did that, yeah. They didn't quite emphasize just how big his struggle was. I think, again, you know, I think they've probably had it all in the editing room, and then I do think, of course, that the teams and drivers do have some say in what makes it and what doesn't. Like, yes, they sign themselves over, but there must be some interference from teams and drivers to say, yeah, we're not going to put that in.
I think a lot of drivers, namely Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, probably have it in their contracts so they don't have to do interviews to Drive to Survive, because I feel like they're very, like, last year they dropped off and they weren't really in it.
Well, it's funny you should say that.
Right.
3 drivers don't appear in the talking heads at all, and those drivers are Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, and Fernando Alonso.
Yeah, I was going to say Alonso, yeah.
So essentially, the 3 drivers who have transcended the sport to the extent that they can turn around and be like, I'm just not going to do that, and no one can say anything about it. Now, that's not to say they didn't cover those drivers with footage from the track and footage from wherever else, but none of them offered their thoughts, opinions, reflections, or anything like that. Which I really, you know, I get why. And to be honest, if I were in their position and I held that power, I'd probably do the same thing, because it's like, they don't need it.
Yeah,
but I especially missed Max, which it's fun to say because, you know, he's not my favorite driver, but he's so funny and he's so honest and he's so blunt at times. Like, it would have been great to just have him pop up here and there to be like, that's BS or like whatever. Like, I'm not, so.
The Formula One TV release a whole bunch of YouTube videos throughout the year of them just like answering quick questions or like saying like a his or her sort of thing, or like, yes, I've done that, or never have I ever. And yeah, I think last year, I think Lewis might have been in one video, so I think he must just have it in so many contracts, being like, yeah, I am not gonna do that, but if I have to, I'll do one just to make sure it's I've ticked that
fulfilled
box,
my
but
contract
otherwise,
or whatever. Yeah.
But otherwise, I am not there. Did they touch on Williams' podiums?
Yeah, so they did what I'm going to refer to as a classic Drive to Survive, where they focused on science for pretty much a whole episode, and they really made it seem like science, you know, was on the brink of quitting F1 altogether, and then he won a podium, you know, which, you know, just wasn't the case. Although, interesting, right? Let me ask you this. They kept going on and on about how, you know, Sainz took this huge gamble by signing for Williams, and Sainz had so many other options and so many other teams that he could have gone to. That's not true? Like, is it? Like, I mean, in terms of his caliber as a driver, yes, there are other teams he would be high quality enough to drive for. But at that time, there weren't any other seats, were there?
So the whole thing was the big one was, or the big three, I guess, was Williams, Alpine, Sauber, which was going to be Audi. His father, Carlos Sainz Sr., has really, really strong ties with Audi. He's in the rallying world and drives for Audi, or drove for Audi. And that was a firm, like, you know, you could be part of a works team, Audi. We you know, we've got big dreams and big aspirations, so we can do this. And there's, I think, actually, and I don't know if this was staged or not, I think it was the season 7 in Drive to Survive. There is a scene with James Vowles waiting for Sainz to turn up and sign. He doesn't turn up because I think he had a bit of a, oh no, maybe Alpine or maybe Audi is a better shot. So in terms of like not really high up the grid, there was also at one point them saying he'll replace Sergio Perez at Red Bull, putting Max and Sainz back together again after their stint at Toro Rosso when they first joined the sport. They were teammates, but then obviously Max got the bump up to Red Bull. That would have been box office, because I think Sainz is one of the best drivers on the grid. I think he's brilliant. Every team he goes to,
I agree,
there's an elevated points tally the following year. He can turn a team around. He can rally a group of people behind him. James Vowles has been talking about the fact that, you know, James will turn up to who is the team principal at Williams at the moment. He'll turn up into the factory, and Sainz is already there with a group of engineers going through things. So he really cares about his work, and that transcends when he's also driving as well. He's a very good racing driver. But yeah, Williams, I think, was the most sensible at the time choice, given that the 2026 engines and Mercedes, blah, 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 although they haven't had the best start. But I still have faith that Williams and James Vowles and Sainz and Albon can do something for this year. So we had a few teams to choose between, but it wasn't like you can go to McLaren, who are currently winning the World Championship, or you can go to Williams. It was they were all in that midfield towards the back.
That's what I remembered too, so I was a bit confused by that. I was like, you know, let's not over exaggerate Drive to Survive.
Well, I think let's call a tree. They do over exaggerate quite often, but no, it's all in the name of making it an entertaining sport, and it brings in a new fan base, which is the main thing, right? So worth watching. Marks out of 10.
I would give it maybe like a 7.
Okay.
Yeah. So solid 7. There wasn't enough George Russell.
Sad times to you. But luckily he's in
People
your
are
room,
going to
so it's
disagree
okay.
with that take because he did actually feature quite a lot, but
Right.
could always be more.
Let's talk about the movie that came out.
Nope.
That came out last year. Interesting.
There were sort of vague shots of them arriving at the premiere, but they didn't. It was more like the way they show them going to other various events throughout the season. It wasn't,
Horner?
Yes. So he obviously receives the news more or less halfway through the season that he has been fired from his position at Red Bull. He talks a lot about how he built the team from the ground up, and he does admit that it was very hurtful and he was angry about it at the time. I actually asked myself the question of, so as we said already, he fired Liam Lawson from his seat after 2 races and replaced him with a Japanese driver called Yuki Tsunoda, who then went on to have an absolutely terrible season. Lots of crashes, lots of DNFs, lots of bottom of the grid qualifying, and it makes me wonder that if he just stuck with Liam, would he have achieved a better outcome over time and maybe retained his job? I don't know.
The whole thing with Red Bull, it's weird. It's, as much as it was, yes, a decline in performance, they weren't that bad. The Max won Japan. He might have won. He won a couple. Imola. And then I remember the Austrian Grand Prix, which is the Red Bull Ring. It's the Red Bull track.
Mm-hmm.
From a marketing perspective, it is the Red Bull racetrack. Red Bull Ring in Spielberg, and also Red Bull is an Austrian company. And they had a dreadful race. Yuki Tsunoda came last, and I think Verstappen got hit by, I want to say, Antonelli at the second corner. And I sort of go, that sucks.
Yeah.
But it's racing. These things
Yeah.
happen. Yuki Tsunoda still hasn't found his feet. That's tricky. It's a really tricky car to drive. We know that from the history of Perez. We know that from the history from Lawson, from even going back as far as Gasly. All of Max's teammates have struggled. Now, I don't know if that's because Max is obviously able to bring in the results, because he's a very, 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 probably the best of the grid in terms of driving ability. But that makes it harder for other drivers to catch up with his driving style because of the way the car's been designed. So anyone that's ever been in that seat, that second seat, and I hope that for Hadjar this year it's better, but anyone that's ever been in that second seat, it's always been a poison chalice, and it's always been a case of, there's nothing I can do in this car. I know I can drive the car because, for example, what you just said about Tsunoda, he was in a V-Carb, which is the Red Bull Junior team. He was in a V-Carb, and then all of a sudden, and was doing well, was scoring points within the first 2 races, and then went to Red Bull and was at the back of the grid. In a car that shouldn't be at the back of the grid. So if they stayed with Lawson, maybe he would have been able to. What's ironic is it's actually worked out better for Lawson because he's still in Formula 1 this year, whereas Tsunoda isn't.
Yeah.
And if it was the other way around, if Lawson stayed and still did relatively bad results, would Lawson now be out of a seat this year, and would Tsunoda still be in at V-Carb? I don't know. Not nice for Yuki because he didn't get a chance to test the car, didn't get a chance to really put any of his... imagine they did that with Ferrari. Lewis, you haven't got a single podium this year, you're out. It just wouldn't happen.
No.
So Red Bull is very much a cutthroat place to be.
Yeah.
But
they did pay Lewis 80 million, so that would have been throwing
they can't do
away
that.
money. Yeah.
But Helmut Marko, who is the sort of puppeteer sorting all of that out, he's now gone. At the end of last year, he's decided to stop. So maybe it's a new changing
a new dawn. Yeah, and they did introduce
us
us to Laurent Mekies, who is Christian Horner's replacement, and he comes across really well. He's very
great.
no nonsense, but not aggressive. Just we're here, we're going to get the job done. Bish bash bosh. I'm Laurent Mekies. So
I'm a Laurent Mekies fan. I think he's good. And it's funny because I appreciate Christian Horner for all he's done, But it's that whole thing. I love to hate him. Like, I love to see him as this pantomime villain. Would I have booed him? Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
But
yeah,
I do enjoy that dynamic. Lauren Meckies, do I think he might be a bit soft to like fulfill that role? Yes, absolutely. But somebody else won't be. I feel like Zach Brown is getting close to trying to be that sort of protagonist that is almost going to turn on itself in a way.
Right.
Like
yeah.
that American
there was so many
boldness.
clips of Zach at like different, donors events and stuff, like making these big speeches, and I mean, for me, it was very cringe. It was so cringe.
He's just a big brash American.
I
dude,
know.
isn't he?
Oh, and one more thing about Horner is that they directly asked him, like, did your sort of difficult relationship with Jos Verstappen, who is Max's dad and manager, for want of a better word, do you know or do you think that Jos had a say in your firing? And Horner says no. He says the decision had nothing to do with Jos Verstappen. It purely came from the powers that be. So I don't know if that's true, but that's what he said.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting because I know there was a lot of talk in the media saying of Jos Verstappen, Max Verstappen's dad, used to race Michael Schumacher back in the day. There was a lot of like chat being like, "Oh yeah, Christian and Jos don't talk, and it's Jos's team now, and Jos is steering the ship, etc." So interestingly, it had nothing to do with it. I wonder if he did in the background, but maybe, yeah, that's a good question that Christian Horner's gone, nope, wasn't anything to do with him. So great, okay, I'll watch it this week.
Go. Yeah,
we'll watch it this week.
Give it a spin, and we'll maybe just do a really quick rundown of your very fleeting thoughts. I don't know, or maybe we'll just talk about it offline. I don't know.
Yeah, more than happy to. Amazing, Sinead. Thank you so much for your little review.
Thank you.
If you haven't watched it, and if you have been listening to this podcast, maybe it's a good idea to try and watch a couple of episodes before the season starts on the 8th of March this week. Worthwhile
especially
getting
if
into.
You are a new-ish fan, because I guess above all, you get to know the drivers. It's about that human element, isn't it? Like, that's why they started it in the first place, so that we could get to know what they're like off track as well as on track, and the dynamics between them. And I mean, anything like that is always going to be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
To see.
Thank you so much, Sinead. Right, I think we'll box, and we'll maybe do another recording of another podcast, which we're also going to launch this week.
Woohoo!
You've been listening to the Formula Fun podcast,
where Jay brings the formula
and Sinead brings the fun. Make sure you like, rate, subscribe, download, do all those things. Bye!
Beep beep.